Hi, everybody. My name is Natalie Yeadon, and I'm one of the co-owners and founders and CEO for Impetus Digital. For those of you who don't know what Impetus Digital does, is we've built some of the best-in-class asynchronous and synchronous virtual collaboration and communication tools for life science companies. We actually do everything from virtual advisory boards, medical education, working groups, but also big corporate events. Where everything's gone virtual, unfortunately, since COVID-19, and that's what we specialize in. So, but what we really believe at Impetus is that, more importantly, everything starts with a conversation. And from these conversations, these big, hairy, audacious conversations, we can do big things. We can work with some of these digital thought leaders, entrepreneurs, leading edge experts like Moshe Safran that we have here today. And we can really push things forward. We can really, truly, and collectively, positively disrupt healthcare. So I'm really happy that I have one of these provocateurs at the table today with me. This is with Moshe Safran. And he is actually a very experienced research and development leader in the computer vision algorithm development space. So very complex stuff. He's going to break it down and make it sound really simple on how we actually get to use this in healthcare. He has over 10 years of experience in all kinds of facets of algorithm development, everything from like hands-on research and implementation to doing things like project management and business development. So he's got that business edge as well. And he's currently the CEO of RSIP Vision USA. He's located in California in the Bay Area. He is leading the RSIP activities in the United States as well as in Canada. And he's working with partners to power their products and services through developing all sorts of artificial intelligence and computer vision modules. And these are actually helping to significantly add value to their clients' offerings and in the market. So Moshe has a PhD from the Interdisciplinary Center for Neural Computation at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. So that's a mouthful. And he's actually focusing on the neural computation, machine learning, and neurobiology. Very exciting stuff. Welcome to the show, Moshe. So happy to have you here today.
Thank you very much, Natalie. I'm happy to be here. It's an honor, and I'll try to live up to your introduction, and it's great to be having this conversation.
It absolutely is. I will have to tell you what an absolutely incredible and really a provocative career background. Tell us a little bit about your journey. Does somebody just wake up one day and say, I want to go and do computational, neural computation and neurobiology? What brought you to this place and then brought you from Israel to the Bay Area? So tell us a little bit about your professional journey.
Great, yeah, no problem. So I've been with RSIP Vision for about 13 years now, actually. I originally joined, as you mentioned, when I was a grad student in the neuroscience program, who sort of started out being interested in the mysteries of the brain, and later on sort of became interested in image processing and in applying that image processing to sort of more practical medical applications. So this started out sort of when I was a grad student many years back, and pretty early on, being at RSIP actually afforded me the opportunity to do what basically amounted to this applied research, creating a novel mathematical model for 3D reconstruction of parts of the human anatomy. But unlike in the academic world, and I don't quite have that PhD, just corrections, so I don't get in trouble with Hebrew U, but basically RSIP gave me the opportunity to do that research, but in a very focused and industrial type setting. So working with one of our big medical device client companies to create a very specific feature for their product that involved developing this mathematical model from the ground up. And then in my career, sort of as that R&D effort and as that research turned into more of a product creation effort, there was sort of a natural progression. So when you're beyond an algorithm and you're already creating a piece of software that needs to be used in a clinical trial, you're starting up a team, you're managing that team that's doing that implementation, then managing and guiding multiple teams in multiple efforts in the company, growing and managing our entire R&D center back in Israel and facilitating sort of that development inside the company. And this sort of progression from research to project management, to management of the teams, to growing the team, leads sort of very naturally to serving as a bridge between what we can do between our algorithm development capabilities and our AI and the outside world and the market. So as you do more of these projects and a wider variety of them, and you work with various different companies, you sort of become this bridge that translates the unmet needs that are coming from the clients, coming from the medical device world, and sort of translating those into more well-defined, actionable game plans for actually developing computer vision software. And that's my main focus today. So as you mentioned, Israel, our R&D teams are located primarily in Israel, Jerusalem, and Tel Aviv. But the companies we work with, the medical imaging and medical device companies, are basically all in the US and Canada, like yourself. So basically my main focus today is deepening our presence in that market, continuously upgrading our capabilities, and really serving as that bridge.
So really interesting that you've been working on this stuff for many, many years before any of this became, daily lingo that we're hearing over and over with investors and all sorts of companies popping up, and that you really have the years and the expertise on these specific algorithms, and bringing that to the medical space today in a very mature way. So when we talk about RSIP, and we're really talking about this, and it's really brilliant, by the way, that you were able to pull in your interests in a research capacity and then suddenly realize that there was a market fit and there was actually a business in this, which is one of the coolest things to really do what you love. So when we actually piece this together and realize that you're building these computational models, I want to kind of talk a little bit about how this applies when you're working on computer vision. And we hear this a lot, and sometimes people might be confused on exactly what computer vision is. You can explain to people, when you're working on computer algorithms, what we mean by computer vision?
Sure, yeah, and so we've been doing this, as you said, from before AI became a buzzword. Obviously, the primary tool for computer vision these days is AI. It is supervised learning and neural networks, but computer vision at its heart is creating a piece of software that receives some sort of image or spatial data as input. It can be a CT scan, it can be a point cloud, it can be an X-ray image or a video feed coming, from a surgical endoscope, receiving some sort of image or video data as input and providing as output whatever it is you're looking for in that image. It can be taking the raw CT scan and turning it into a 3D model. It can be taking 2D images and turning those into a 3D model that can be manipulated by, say, a surgeon who's planning a surgery. It can be an interpretation of that image, for instance, screening images for disease classification, or referring patients or recommending different types of procedures to different patients based on their imaging data. So it's a very wide field. We as a company are focused basically exclusively on medical computer vision tasks. And under that umbrella, again, it could be many different types of images. It can be many different types of medical verticals, cardio, ortho, endoscopy, many more medical tasks. But for us, there are many commonalities between these different challenges, because in the end, you're getting an image and you're looking to locate something in that image, or you're looking to provide some sort of interpretation in that image. And you can borrow technologies that were used for one type of task and one type of modality and accumulated experience in one type of task that translates sometimes very nicely to the other medical tasks as well.
So let's actually just piece this together for some people who are just starting to dabble in the whole idea around medical vision and these very complex computer algorithms. Mm-hmm. And when we also use the word machine learning, where these algorithms self-teach themselves and they get smarter the more data they start to accumulate. So let's actually just piece together, for example, in the cardiology space. Tell us a little bit about the mechanisms that you have built, obviously not giving away the proprietary secret sauce, but how the algorithm interprets data and what it does. So just explaining very generically of how it starts to interpret and learn the more, scans or whatever it is that's getting, and how that emits things as an output. So tell us over time how one of these algorithms or these machines gets smarter and learns over time.
Sure, yeah. So I'll give you an example from cardiology, from actually one of the modules we talked about recently involving interpretation of ultrasound clips. right? So the goal here is to provide an automated algorithm that will do what expert in echo interpretation is doing, which is measuring the size of a heart chamber. So you have an ultrasound clip, you see a beating heart, and you need to estimate heart function by estimating the area seen of that heart chamber when the heart is in systole and when the heart is in diastole. So this involves basically automating the process of detecting the edges of that heart chamber in the clip and performing the measurement. This can be done manually. People who are very experienced at looking at these ultrasound clips can do it well manually and do it accurately. But in some environments, you may have a physician, but that physician may not be very experienced in interpreting ultrasound images. And anybody who's ever seen an ultrasound clip knows these are very noisy images, very speckly. They're very hard to interpret. The edges can go away. They can disappear. So what we did here is created a piece of software that automated that process. So the software automatically measures and shows the user where the heart chamber is, what its area is, and automates that measurement process. Now, in the past, before AI, I would say, became the leading solution for computer vision, this would have been very difficult to do well, right? Because the edges in an ultrasound image are not continuous at all. They're sort of a very disjoint, very full of speckles. It's very hard to give a computer set of fixed instructions on how to do this. First, look for a pixel that's brighter than its surroundings, and then connect that to the next pixel. Before AI, trying to create an edge detection or segmentation algorithm for that type of ultrasound would be very laborious. It would be, you'd end up with something that would be very specific to one type of clip, and it wouldn't necessarily be that stable. And what AI and machine learning lets us do in computer vision is, instead of sort of trying to solve the whole problem ourselves and trying to write out that algorithm step by step for the computer, what we're doing is we're teaching the computer to learn from examples. So instead of writing an explicit handcrafted algorithm, we're providing labeled examples. We use an echo specialist or a panel of experts to actually do that annotation, to actually do that measurement. We show the machine learning system sets examples of the input, examples of the output that it should be generating, where it should be measuring, where the borders of the chamber should be. And as more and more data is fed into the system, it learns from these examples how it should be processing the images. So you sort of have a very general purpose system that's taking images and that can compute, theoretically can compute any function from those images that you would want. And then you're teaching it from examples what it should be doing, and it's learning the details of what to do all by itself.
And I'm obviously telling you something, not going to tell you anything that you don't already know or already have heard many times, but these machines are only as smart as the data that they're basically consuming. So tell us a little bit about some of the opportunities and the challenges that your company has faced with the kinds of data that you've been able to get in front of your algorithms. Again, there's opportunities around data lakes, but there's also challenges. Geographical barriers, where are you getting access to this data, and where do you believe some of the intrinsic biases, and how does this potentially impact error rates with what you're using? And let's just continue with the cardiology example.
Sure, yeah, so the data barrier is one of the barriers of widespread use in medical imaging. Sometimes the barrier involves just getting enough data, getting the right type of data. And there are also barriers in creating the ground truth. So creating a good, accurate ground truth can be expensive. It can be time consuming. You don't always have access to the people who can create that reliably in huge volumes. You need to have shortcuts. So we actually have some tools that mitigate this need. Currently sort of the state of AI is that you're creating a module that's specific for a specific type of data. You're creating a solution, say, for a specific type of ultrasound device. Those images are going to have their own characteristics, right? They're being used on a particular type of patient cohort, right? So you need to collect the data from that specific device and from a set of patients that's representative of the set of patients that the device is eventually going to be used on. For that, typically use a combination of data sources, right? So we have our own data sources, they're data providers. We have collaborations with hospitals in Israel and in the US and in Europe and all over the world, providing training data. And in many cases, also the company, our client company, the companies that's developing the device is also involved in acquiring the data, right? So the medical device companies have the access to the physicians, they have the access to the centers where this is being used. And in some cases, and now these companies are all putting a lot more thought into this to begin with, instead of collecting the data and then worrying about being able to use it. They're getting better at collecting the data in a manner that they'll actually be able to use it in AI. So they're collecting that device-specific data or that patient cohort-specific data to begin with, and then we'll be using the client companies or the device companies' data in order to develop the solution.
Fantastic, yeah. And where are you finding some of the limitations of the data? What have you been finding of recent?
So actually, one of the most common limitations is that you don't have as much data as you think you would have, right? So you can get hundreds of examples, sometimes a few thousands of examples. It's very difficult to collect tens of thousands of examples. So if you're just going to take this data and feed it into some generic neural network or generic solution, you're not going to be able to get the amount you're going to need in order for this general purpose neural network to just work, right? Because the sort of common perception is that if you feed enough data into a neural network, it's going to solve the problem. You just need to show it enough examples. Now, the sort of the brute force approach. Now, that may be true, but in medical, most cases, you're not going to get enough data fast enough unless you build a whole huge operation. You build your whole company around amassing these massive amounts of data. There are companies that are built around that. We are not working that way. So unless you really make a huge effort, you're not always going to get enough data for things to just work as is. You really need to build a customized solution. You need to use the information that's in smaller amounts of images, for instance, formulating things as image segmentation tasks. And then you have a lot of information even in one image. There are different areas of the image that can be used, and finding a way to use that relatively limited amount of data in order to get a robust solution. And that's sort of where the secret sauce comes in. That's where the medical applications focus of our company comes in, because if you wait until you have enough data to just pour into your standard UNet architecture or whatever it is, there's never going to be enough. You really need to customize the solution very carefully to get it to work well in practical timeframes and practical data set sizes.
So that's actually a really great point. And one of the reasons or the differentiators for RSIP is really that the magical component of how you tie that data in when you don't, and you never do, have enough data. So you talked a little bit about client partners. So here's RSIP, and let's be honest, in amidst many other companies that also do computer visioning work in the healthcare space, how do these partner clients find you? And how does those partnerships get engaged into the purposes of these partnerships?
So we work these days mainly with the big medical device companies and big medical imaging companies. Now, I mean, we've got much more visibility online and on LinkedIn than we did in the past. So it's no longer a word of mouth kind of thing, right? I talk basically every week to people who I found on LinkedIn, who have found me on LinkedIn, who've come across our website and seen that we've done some work, that's related or adjacent to their task or their vertical or things that they're trying to develop. It's a lot based on relationship building, right? In the end, the medical world, the healthcare world is infinite. It's huge, but actually, the world of medical device companies is not all that big a market. It's a few hundred big companies who are really developing, really innovating, really investing in innovation, really developing new features for their products. And those are the companies who we are working with. That's sort of a very focused kind of market to find and to get noticed by. So that said, the word of mouth component or the knowing us from previous work with us or from work we've done with other parts of the company is also a very important part of that, right? So seeing that we've delivered in the past and knowing more details than I can share here about things that we've implemented and modules we've created and problems that we've solved is very helpful, to get that initial confidence and to get that relationship developed.
Absolutely. And so when these folks are starting to do work with you, with these big medical device companies, tell us a little bit about some of the business planning, the more futuristic aspirations that they have. Why are they approaching companies like yourself to start investing in computer visioning? Are they not cannibalizing the products that they've already created? What is their strategic long-term plan of partnering with RSIP?
So almost all the medical device companies are very keen on investing in computer vision and AI, and they have various sort of a variety of levels of readiness for this. So some companies, they say, yeah, we're an implant company. We've got great mechanical engineering capabilities. We've got great relationships with the surgeons, with the hospitals, but we're not a software company per se, right? We're not a high-tech company per se, and building up that internal capability is not always a trivial matter for these companies. Some companies, they do have an existing platform, they have capital equipment, they have their software team, they have algorithm development teams, not necessarily focused on imaging. There are other types of algorithms, other parts of software that are sort of more core and more core to their business. It doesn't always make sense for these companies to start focusing on what for them is a completely new field of AI and of computer vision algorithm developments. It can make sense for them to use us to sort of jumpstart that effort. Sometimes it's a combination. They'll want us to build a solution for them and also for us to train their internal team. In terms of what they're trying, what we're trying to build, what they're trying to develop. So there's a progression here. There are tasks that are very imaging heavy, like surgical planning. If you need a model of a bone from a CT scan, right? There's no way around doing image interpretation. This can be done manually, but it's a lot of work. You can use a computer to automate this. Now, if you want a model of the airway tree, for example, this is a very, very detailed piece of anatomy, and doing that manually or doing it with older technologies that require manual intervention is just not feasible. So their image processing and image analysis is a must. It's not optional, it's necessary. If you want a 3D model of the airway tree in order to plan in bronchoscopy, you need to automate it, and you need AI to automate it, robustly, to automate it in a way that's not going to hold up the planning. So those are sort of the basic tasks, the very image-heavy tasks. And then there are sort of the more up-and-coming, I'd say, present to future tasks. These can involve sort of more challenging reconstruction tasks, like building 3D models from 2D images and not from 3D inputs, sort of filling in the gaps in the data. These can be image interpretation tasks, for instance, like having a safety warning for a surgery, right? So it's beyond just turning one image into a model or turning one type of image into a visually enhanced image. It's more about interpreting those images in a higher order matter, like clinical decision support. For instance, you have images of a patient and you want to help the clinician provide recommendations for what type of surgery that patient should be referred to, right? So you have a doctor who's very experienced in this can do it well. The less experienced ones require support, and we're using AI to bake in that expert experience into a recommendation system. So it's sort of a gradual process of automation, from turning the images into a more salient image, into a usable type of image, and sort of using AI to provide guidance, to provide sort of recommendations or warnings on based on those images that are coming in.
Yeah, fantastic. So I'm actually just curious as well. I mean, there's the world that we know it before COVID-19 and the way things were being imaged and people were physically coming in for scans and all those sorts of things. And now we're looking at post-COVID-19 and what this new normal looks like. The question comes down to is, will scans continue to be needed in the traditional way? Of course, nobody's going to have an MRI scan or a CT scan in their home, but obviously this is where data is coming from. But as we approach this world where everything is kind of distanced and done online, what has evolved, or what do you predict is going to evolve with what your computer algorithms are going to do in conjunction with these companies in the future, as we think about digital pathology, as we think about digital diagnostics? Where do you see this new normal evolving to?
Sure. So at our company, we're more focused on the interventional and surgical use cases. And for those use cases, right, there's no way around the patient getting an X-ray or a CT or an MRI, right? And the surgery is going to be performed in person, right? So for sort of from our seat in the house, it's less about telehealth and those kind of applications. Now, what we're seeing in this space, or what we saw in this space early on in COVID-19, is that there was a lot of nervousness, a lot of uncertainty about growth, right? Elective surgeries were dipping, and then they dipping again. So there was some jitteriness in the market in terms of how much they could allow themselves to invest in the future. But all in all, we're not really seeing a negative impact. If anything, there's an acceleration. And the reason is that the pandemic sort of underscored across the board the need for digital transformation, right? So in telehealth, yeah, or in the sort of more everyday healthcare settings, there's an explosion in that, and consumer health products as well. So even in our area, which is more again interventional and surgical, so it's not going to be remote. There's also increased understanding that automating the interpretation of images is a must. So again, we're less in the specific applications that have gained momentum because of COVID directly, right? So there are all these challenges on, screening, on detecting COVID in X-rays, detecting COVID in CTs. There's patient monitoring, a lot of work there, mostly in the non-image space. So we've experienced this less through the COVID-specific applications and more as sort of increased awareness in general of the importance of AI and the importance of the digital world, more in the surgical and interventional context.
Fantastic. That's really, really interesting. Let's actually just spend a couple of minutes, because there's so many different applications, especially in this whole diagnostic space that you're talking about, in different functional and therapeutic areas. And so it'd probably be a good opportunity for the audience to hear a little bit about how you work in these different spaces. So we talked about cardiology, and you used a case example, but tell us a little bit about what you have done or what you could do in the pulmonology area. Sure.
Yeah, so again, a lot of our work is in surgical and interventional cases, including pulmonology. There's a series of needs and common use cases for computer vision and AI in this space. So it usually starts out with image-based planning, right? So you mentioned pulmonology. To plan a bronchoscopy, you need a 3D model of the airway tree. This comes from a CT. A raw CT scan is just a bunch of voxels. It doesn't give you an actual understanding of the anatomy. So we've automated this process. The next stage in these contexts is usually the intraoperative stage, right? So there's surgical navigation to do any kind of minimally invasive surgery, navigating off of images, while minimizing, the amount that you're actually seeing in the patient. You need to register these images to each other. You need to have some way of, say, taking the CT scan or taking the model you've built from the preoperative image and understanding where that anatomy is now located in the OR and where that's located relative to the surgical tools, right? So in minimally invasive surgery, the surgeon is only seeing some of the information with their own eyes, and they're manipulating the tool. They need to know where that tool is relative to the anatomy. So there's what's called image registration. You need to match the coordinate systems of the tools that are being used now in the OR and of the images that you are able to acquire in the OR with what's usually more detailed images that are required before the surgery. So again, for all these applications, you need to do computerized image processing. You can't get around it. There's no way to do an accurate registration by asking the interventionalist to, while they're supposed to be focusing on the surgery, to start manipulating these 2 or 3 images and trying to locate them manually relative to each other. You need to automate this process. So that's sort of the first.
Is it being done? Is this being generated during the surgery? Is it being done before? When is this actually happening?
Mm-hmm. So typically you have, say, imaging that's acquired before the surgery, say a CT scan or an MRI. You can use that to create a 3D model of the patient's anatomy. Now, during the procedure, in many cases, you don't have a CT machine like a cone beam CT in the OR. That's not always practical. You almost never will have an MRI in the operating room. So you have more sparse information coming in from the OR itself. Maybe you have some sort of tracking system that allows you to touch a few points on the bone. Maybe you have a C-arm getting x-rays intraoperatively. So you have 2D images coming from the OR, but that's not enough. The surgeon, in order to navigate, wants to understand where they are right now relative to that 3D anatomy. So then you have what's called image registration. You're matching images or data that you have that's correct right now in the OR to where the patient is now and where the surgical implements are now. You need to match that limited information you have from the OR itself to preoperative images, such as a CT scan that contain the full information on the anatomy. And that's critical in order to perform accurate surgery and to navigate accurately.
So there seems like there's a lot of opportunities, obviously, in the OR space, and we're hearing a lot about, robotics, and we're also hearing a lot about integration with things like virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed, all mixed reality, what have you. Are you starting to combine some of these technologies so that you're able to effectively connect 2D and 3D imaging models and the outputs from your algorithms to improve the outcomes of these surgical interventions?
Yes, yeah. So as I said, the first step is actually matching that preoperatively generated anatomy to the images that are coming in during the procedure. That's sort of the basics. And medical robots, first and foremost today, they act as an extension of the surgeon's arm, like the Da Vinci robot. The robot is under direct control, and we're nowhere near having, a robotic surgeon. That's quite far in the future. Now, what is AI contributing today? What is automated image analysis contributing today beyond that navigation? We can apply here an analogy from the automotive world. So the first step is sort of an automated driver assistance type of thing, an ADAS type of thing. So you're not trying to replace the surgeon, you're just trying to provide, say, a safety warning. When the AI is detecting some event in the video that the surgeon needs to be alerted to, we can provide that warning. You can provide visual enhancement of the images, right? So not actually trying to replace the surgeon's hands at the controls, but to just enhance those images, to highlight the parts of the anatomy they need, or to show the 3D information superimposed on the 2D image that the surgeon is seeing at that time. There are analytics applications, right? So not necessarily even intra-procedurally, but also afterwards, helping to automate the process of automating the analysis of the surgical video and providing feedback for training purposes. Again, it's not that tomorrow an AI is going to be more of an expert than an experienced surgeon and replacing the experienced surgeon in that surgical training application. It's that AI is helping those domain experts. So for instance, instead of the trainer needing to watch an entire video, we can abbreviate that video automatically to save time for the trainer. We can detect, identify what implements are being seen. We can automate parts of those process to help the surgeon. And this is a gradual progression, right? So in the automotive world also, I mean, a few years ago, Mobileye was this, annoying thing that was beeping and everybody would turn off. And today, I mean, my parents are buying a new car. They will not buy a new car, not only without a blind spot warning, but also with automatic braking. That's already a pretty high level of trust, right? So in medical, we're also walking along that path, but the pace is even, I think, more measured and more careful than in automotive, but it's the same pace in the end. It's first visual enhancement, first showing things like that blind spot warning, first showing things or highlighting things or fusing types of images in an automatic manner in a way that cannot be done manually. Then after that visual enhancement, sort of an advisory role, providing warnings or providing enhancements to the surgeon training process. And then afterwards, as these capabilities advance themselves, as they get more accurate and more robust, we'll be able to start automating more and more of that workflow, and getting more and more trust from the users, sort of in a piecewise manner.
You're absolutely right. I mean, really what you've just delineated there is the age-old challenge of change management and people adopting to new styles of thinking and working and adoptions of what the medical field actually is, and a redefining, if you will, of what a physician or a surgeon's role is. So there's an existential kind of a philosophical challenge associated with changing this. For example, does the physician become eventually one day more of a glorified data scientist? Do they become obsolete? Right now we're seeing the COVID-19 burnout, but is this the solution longer term for the never-ending concern of not having enough people at the table doing the work? What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think the goal, as I see it, is really allowing the physician and the doctor or the surgeon to focus on the surgery, to focus on what they do best, right? To help them offload as much of the grunt work as possible, so to speak. So instead of having a radiologist having to, in radiology or in the screening applications, instead of having this burnout because there's this tremendous volume of images and they have to pour through all the slices of each and every CT, and it's just a huge amount of work, saving time for them, automating the easier parts of this, reducing the amount of information that the radiologist is actually going to have to look at, where there's triaging scans or automatically pointing out the findings in the image, and then having the radiologist come in only for their specific expertise, right? Only for, say, giving the final diagnosis or detecting a suspicious area, saying, this is a lesion, here it is. You don't need to measure this. We've measured this for you. Now you say if you think that this is cancer or not, right? So really letting, or having the surgeon not having to worry about sort of dealing with the processing of the images, giving them those images or giving them, for instance, that 3D visualization already there, and having them focus on actually performing the surgery. So for instance, in the 2D to 3D reconstruction we were talking about before. So a surgeon or interventionist, they understand a lot of the 3D structure of what they're doing intuitively, and we don't have a LiDAR or a sonar in our bodies, right? Our biology doesn't really provide us with true 3D information, right? In the end, a human or a surgeon is using two images that they see with their own two eyes, and this is enough for them to understand a lot about the 3D structure of what they're manipulating, right? They're using the two images they're getting, and they're using a lot of prior knowledge, a lot of their experience, a lot of what they know about what this anatomy looks like. Now, what we can do these days with AI is sort of mimic that, do that, but in a more quantitative manner. Actually, not only have this 3D information in the mind's eye of the surgeon, but provide a 3D model based on those multiple 2D images that can be rotated, that can be viewed from every angle, that has all the details in there. Sort of have a quantitative representation of this that's on screen, that can be manipulated, that can be visualized through AR or through whatever other visualization technology that's appropriate. And then this is just a tool for the surgeon. It's not replacing them. It's allowing them to have that information sort of in a more salient way and to focus on doing their job, basically.
So really interesting things. And a lot of times you'll hear people say, AI is really only there to replace the 3Ds. They talk about for things that are dull, dangerous, or dirty is optimally the way that you want to use AI. But it still begs the question about the things that you hear over and over again about some of these algorithms being smarter and wiser and more accurate than some of the work that's being done by ophthalmologists or radiologists. Do you see those professions sort of as sunset professions? Do you see these eventually over time just being replaced and using, empathic or empathetic, workers like nurses and whatever to deal with the actual patients? Is there going to be a need for ophthalmologists and radiologists in the future?
Well, I think right now, I think the need for radiologists is bigger than it's ever been, just because of the volume of data that's being generated. And I expect that to go down a lot, right? I expect, as you said, it's not only the 3Ds, it's sort of being better, at least than a beginner at doing some of these tasks. So yeah, the amount of need, I don't think we're going to need to be scaling up the number of radiologists we're going to be trained. I think the amount of that need is going to be going down, and I think the profession is going to change. It's going to more focus on, for instance, using their expertise to guide development of AI solutions, right? So trying to bake in that expert knowledge that's in their head and that's in their experience, trying to take that and turn that into an AI module that can be used much wider. So I don't think the profession is going to go away, but I think it's going to be sort of probably lower volume and higher expertise required, and different use cases, not necessarily the use case of the day-to-day work of interpreting the images, but as you said, maybe turning into data scientists, or maybe focusing only on very, very specialized tasks. That's definitely.
So I think it'll be really interesting to see the medical schools of the future, that potentially they would be collaborations with, data science, computational. We talked a little bit, about even the opportunity around computational neuroscience. It's almost like a melding or a merging of these different departments, and building this into the actual training program of some of these specialties.
Yes,
So,
in radiology for sure. Yeah, I mean, in surgery, it's a little bit different, right? Because the physical skills required for this, even when you have a robot as an extension of that physical skill, that's going to be required for quite some time. But there also that expertise is very useful in helping to create AI and to create algorithms.
So some of these robots, machines, algorithms, they can start to get pretty hefty and expensive, and they're obviously being billed to sort of the actual institutions. So I'm just kind of curious about the regulatory approval process. What does that look like? At least from the pharmaceutical standpoint, the FDA is built in, software as medical device, and some new divisions, new approval processes. How does that apply to products like yourself or services like yourself? And who ends up paying for this at the end of the day?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So in the interventional and surgical space, we're a bit farther from that software as a medical device in terms of constantly learning systems. There's more wariness of that. And again, the amount of data is sometimes smaller than, say, in digital pathology. So right now, sort of the best practice in this world is not to do this constant online learning, but rather have discrete approvals for discrete versions of the system, and that process doesn't look much different for an AI-based system than it would for a classical computer vision based system. It's going to be easier if there's some human in the loop, if there's a user even just approving the result, just clicking OK, rather than marking the landmarks themselves, just clicking OK on the whatever the AI has generated, because it's fully automatic. That can be easier than actually changing the workflow. So if you're taking an AI and making the workflow more efficient without actually trying to modify it, that can be easier than if you're actually trying, to get rid of, say, in diagnostics, to get rid of somebody who's doing the diagnosis, which is a much more laborious process. In the end, this is usually being used as a tool for the surgeon. The surgeon is still involved. The surgeon is still looking at that result and deciding whether to trust it or not. And that can make the regulatory hurdle actually easier than, say, in screening. If you're saying the radiologist doesn't have to look at this anymore at all, that can actually be harder in my view.
What is your company doing right now in terms of clinical trials? Like, what are some of the questions you're asking and some of the hypotheses that you're generating?
Mm-hmm. So in the clinical trial stage, typically this is led by our clients. This is led by the medical device companies because they sort of are leading the clinical aspect of the use case. And we're supporting that clinical trial, typically by measuring what the results look like, providing new versions of the software in order to support that trial. So we're in a supporting role at that stage. We're not out of the picture, we're in the picture, but we're providing the more technical analysis of what the results look like, how the algorithm is performing, understanding which cases are working well, which cases need improvement, that kind of thing. So in the end, we're an AI and computer vision consultancy, right? We're focused on building the solution itself and assessing how that solution is performing. The clinical trial and the regulatory submission itself, in the hospitals is led by the client.
You've talked a lot about how your client partners currently are big medical device companies. I'm just curious if there is a longer term plan to start some partnerships with pharmaceutical companies. Companies, for example, that have products and medicines in ophthalmology or in cancer, as we think about some of these opportunities around diagnosis and precision medicine and biomarkers and that sort of thing. Is that sort of somewhere in the roadmap of where you're planning future partnerships?
Right now, from our seat in the house, the medical device and interventional use cases are much more natural fit for us than the pharma companies. We do work with the types of images that the pharmaceutical companies are working with a lot. So whether it's microscopy images, digital pathology images, we do work with those types of images and do the same computer vision tasks, finding the cells, cell segmentation, classifying the findings based on various channels in the image, identifying tumor regions. We're creating we do all those technologies and all those capabilities, but mainly for like on-device use cases, right? So slide scanners and baking in that computer vision capability into the device itself, that's a more natural fit for our company.
Somebody asked a question in our chat here that we were asking about what about imaging and 3D printing of biomatter for the replacement of organs? Is that something that your company indulges in, does, explores? What do you have to say around that?
Yeah, so we haven't had a project specifically for that use case for 3D printing of biomatter. We are doing a lot of surgical planning applications, right? So that involves generating a 3D model of anatomy. You can print that model, but for surgical planning, typically that's a less important part of the process. I think the technologies are relevant for this. We're not currently involved in that space.
I'm just what's your thoughts on using statistical modeling to predict infectious disease rates with AI? I guess that's a question for COVID. I don't know if it's something your company does, but I thought I would ask the question.
Yeah, so definitely that's a very important task. I think probably most of that is less related to images, right? It's more related to metadata of the population and modeling that. I would say today less so with explicit statistical modeling, and with the large volumes of data available today, more with AI, with sort of using machine learning to discover what the model should be for disease prediction. We're doing some predictive modeling work, but again, more image-based predictive modeling, right? And it's more of predicting what type of procedure is appropriate for this patient, or what diseases this patient may have based on their images.
Well, on that same note, and it is a bit COVID-19 specific,
yeah,
we're hearing a lot about the increase in mental health issues, depression, addiction, all sorts of things are going on for people, and wellness is really the buzzword for 2021. Can your algorithms and technologies assist people in the diagnosis or the prediction of people, or the discovery of the mental health issues that they're having because of COVID? Is this an area of potential investigation or opportunity for your company?
So, there's the whole field of affect recognition in images, right? Computer vision today is very good at interpreting faces and facial expressions. So this definitely has mental health applications. I think the hurdle here would be the model for data collection and data acquisition for this kind of system, right? So there is the capacity to use images in mental health applications. I would need to sort of myself or whoever would try to have initiative in the space would need to think to sort of get a handle on how this is going to work in practice, right? How those images are going to be acquired, how the training data is going to be acquired, and what the use case is going to look like, right? So yeah, one can use images to screen for mental health issues, but how is this going to be used in practice, right? I mean, if you're building an app and getting people to answer a survey or to have a chat, I mean, there are companies doing like mental health and wellness, remote psychology services when you're chatting. Then you're going to get a lot of textual data. You're going to get a lot of data from surveys. You could ask people, to record a short video of themselves or something like that, and you would get imaging data that would be very rich and very useful. The question is more social acceptability. Are people going to adopt this, right? Are people going to consent to being surveilled? I think consenting to being surveilled with images is usually a bigger ask or a bigger hurdle than answering a survey or providing textual data or getting behavioral data that's just out there on the internet. So again, in the hardcore sort of medical applications, yeah, I mean, I go in for the patient's going in for an X-ray. There's no hurdle here. There's no question here. You're going to get that rich imaging data because it's a requirement to perform surgery or to plan surgery. In the health and wellness space, and even like patient monitoring in hospitals, those type of applications, I think moving from non-image data to image data, there's more questions to be addressed there about how that's going to happen in practice.
It's going to be very interesting.
Then, yeah, the technology is there.
It's going to be a very interesting world, I think, in the next 5 to 10 years on that whole privacy risk, compliance area. What it means, what does it mean to own data? What does it mean to share, especially as we start to get into this world of biometrics that are retrieved sort of seamlessly through our TVs and our phones and our smartwatches and our wearables and the Alexas of the world. So it's going to be very interesting to see these ambient biometrics and where these come from and what this is going to mean in the future, especially as we start talking about like the Elon Musk's Neuralink. And the uploading of all of this data and what this means, and the interest in computational neuroscience and really learning to, for example, to overpower or start to control your autonomic system, and becoming these sort of really these beings or these cyborgs who can start controlling parts of ourselves that we never have been before, becoming these super people. What's your generalized thoughts on the future of that?
Yeah, so I don't think we're going to become a cyborgs unless you call somebody who Googles whenever they want some piece of knowledge. They use Google. You can say that they're using the internet as an extension of their brain and their knowledge base. But I don't think we're going to become cyborgs. I mean, neuroprosthesis is a real thing. It's going to be there. It's going to be real and neuroscience. And this is more in the academic world so far. Neuroscience is also starting to inform, the development of AI methods, of AI algorithms. Now, this is not out there right now, in the market, in algorithms that we're using every day. The analogy of, the state of the art or the best practice neural networks to the brain, it's a loose analogy, right? It's a network structure. They're units that are talking to each other and affecting each other's activation. It's not really neurally based. There is some work in the academic world on trying to use what we know from neuroscience to inform AI, practical AI, and to make AI algorithms better. For instance, there's the issue of the stability of neural networks. I'm talking about artificial neural networks of AI, right? So if we have enough data, we can get to quite impressive results. We can get to a very robust results, but we don't necessarily understand the failure mode. So in that 1% of the case where the algorithm is not working, or even 0.1% of the cases in which the algorithm is not working, we don't necessarily know how to interpret those failure modes. We don't necessarily know how to predict those failure modes, right? So if we want to get to increasing levels of automation, then eventually we're going to need to solve these cases. I think there isn't really a good understanding now of why these neural networks are as stable and are as good as generalizing as they are. How can a system with so many parameters, sometimes more parameters then exist in its training data. How is this system really stable? Why is it generalizing this that well, right? There's the whole topic of adversarial attacks. You can show that if you make very small tweaks to an image, you can fool the neural network. This is not understood well enough, and I think neuroscience can help in understanding this, because neuroscientists are trying to understand the brain. They've been spending decades in researching this very, very complex system, much more complex than an artificial neural network, and trying to probe this complex system that's not tractable, and try to understand things and get interpretability and getting insight into these into the biology and into the brain. And I think insights from this field can be helpful in understanding our artificial neural networks better, and sort of eventually improving the way they're engineered to make them more robust and more interpretable.
Beautiful, love it. So many interesting things that you shared, Moshe. Fascinating work that the RSIP company is working on. For anybody listening to this afterwards, we are going to share all of the data. If you want to connect with Moshe to talk further, potentially about some partnerships, ideas, pass some ideas along, or to find out more about his company, we'll be posting that in the show notes for either YouTube or a podcast channel. So we invite you to look for that. Thank you, everybody, for your time and joining us today. And anybody who's interested in having these kinds of conversations, these big, hairy, audacious conversations, these beyond the pill discussions, these things that are provocative, going beyond thinking into futuristic thinking, we invite you to also connect with us on LinkedIn and also on our website, impetusdigital.com. We actually have some of the best-in-class asynchronous and synchronous virtual collaboration tools so that you can have these conversations both internally and with your customers. So thanks, everybody, for your time. Moshe, this was absolutely an outstanding conversation, and wishing everybody a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you very much, Natalie.